Think about this for a second. In the 20th century, China went through maybe one of the most radical, most rapid transformations in all of human history. We're talking about a period of absolute chaos, of war, of revolution, that didn't just reshape the country, it reshaped the entire world. So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did a 2,000-year-old empire just become a communist superpower in about 40 years? I mean, that's less than a single lifetime. The answer? Well, it's an incredible story of conflict, of competing ideas, and really a fight for the very soul of China. Okay, so to really get a handle on this revolution, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to understand the world it was born into. And let me tell you, that world was just pure chaos. A total collapse that left this giant power vacuum. You see, at the start of the 20th century, China wasn't really one unified country. Not at all. It was more like a patchwork quilt of territories, each run by these powerful military leaders. We call them warlords. And on top of that, you had foreign powers, Japan, Western nations, carving out their own little pieces of the pie, just taking advantage of all the weakness. And what's just wild is how fast it all happened. I mean, in 1911, 2,000 years of imperial rule just, poof, it's gone. A new republic tries to form, but it's way too weak to hold things together, and that's what kicks off the warlord era. Then, right in the middle of all this chaos, you get the May 4th movement in 1919. This thing sparks this intense new nationalism, and this is absolutely key. It's what introduces Marxist ideas to a whole generation of young, frustrated intellectuals. So into this massive power vacuum step two major players. Two political parties, each with a completely radically different idea for what China should be. And this is what set the stage for a struggle that would last for decades. All right, so on one side, you've got the Nationalists, the KMT, led by Kai-shek. Their plan was pretty simple. Unify China, kick out the foreign powers. Their support? It came mainly from the big cities and some Western countries. Then on the other side, you have the Communists, the CPC. They're looking to the Soviet Union for inspiration. And their strategy is totally different. They're not focused on the cities. They're building their support with the huge population of rural peasants. Now, here's where it gets kind of weird. Their first move? They actually teamed up. Believe it or not, the Soviet Union kind of pushed them together, and they formed what's called the First United Front. You know the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Well, their shared enemy was the warlords who were ripping the country to shreds. But let's just say this alliance was built on very, very shaky ground. And that brings us to the next chapter. Because that alliance, it didn't just break, it absolutely shattered. I mean, it exploded in a wave of violence that would throw the country into decades of civil war and, in the process, forge the entire identity of the Communist Party. This is the turning point. In 1927, Kai-shek gets really nervous about how much influence the communists are gaining, and he turns on his allies, viciously. In Shanghai and other cities, his troops literally start hunting down and executing communists, tens of thousands of them. Just like that, the fragile alliance was dead. The Chinese Civil War was on. So after that massacre, the communists are on the run. I mean, they were almost completely wiped out. The Nationalists were hunting them relentlessly, forcing what was left of the party to flee their bases in the south and start, well, what would become one of the most grueling journeys in all of military history. Get this, 9,000 kilometers. To give you some perspective, that's basically like walking from New York City all the way to Istanbul. That's the distance these communists marched, over brutal mountains and raging rivers, all while being shot at just to survive. This was so much more than a retreat. It was an absolutely desperate fight for their lives. And here's the thing you really have to understand. Even though only a tiny fraction of them actually survived, the Long March became the founding myth of the entire revolution. It was an incredible propaganda tool, a symbol of their toughness, their dedication, and most importantly, it was during this nightmare journey that one man, Mao Zedong, rose up and became the undisputed, charismatic leader of the whole movement. But then, just when you think things can't get more complicated, an outside threat changes everything. Japan launches a full-scale invasion of China in 1937. So what happens? The two sides, the Nationalists and Communists, very reluctantly agree to team up again in a second united front to fight this common enemy. But you can bet nobody forgot what happened last time. The Civil War wasn't over, it was just on pause. Which brings us to the final showdown. Japan is defeated in 1945. which means that external threat is now gone. The truce? Over. The Civil War was back on, and this time it was for all the marbles. The United States even tried to step in and broker a peace deal, but it was no use. The hatred between the two sides just ran way too deep. By 1946, the country was right back where it started, plunged into a brutal, all-out war between the Nationalists and the Communists. So you have to ask, why did the Nationalists start to fall apart? I mean, on paper, they looked so much more powerful. Well, the rot really started at the top. Their government was incredibly corrupt. They bungled the economy so badly that hyperinflation just went through the roof, making people's life savings totally worthless, practically overnight. The soldiers were exhausted, their morale was in the gutter, and they were just losing the support of the people fast. And the Communists, they offered a completely different picture. Their guerrilla fighters were super disciplined, highly motivated. Their propaganda was brilliant, but their real masterstroke, their killer app, was a simple, powerful promise. We will take the land from the rich landlords and give it to you, the peasants. And that single promise earned them the fierce loyalty of hundreds of millions of people in the countryside, all of them united under Mao's strong leadership. And after that, the end came really fast. The Communists launched these huge offensives, and the Nationalist armies just seemed to melt away. By 1949, it was over. Kai-shek and what was left of his government and his army fled the mainland, escaping to the island of Taiwan. The long, bloody war was finally finished. But see, the Communist victory wasn't just the end of a civil war. No way. It was the beginning of a brand new era for China, and it sent a seismic shockwave through the entire world. And standing there on top of Tiananmen Square in Beijing, Mao Zedong declared, "The Chinese people have stood up." With those famous words, he officially founded the People's Republic of China. For him, for his followers, this was the moment that ended what they called the century of humiliation, 100 years of being pushed around by foreign powers. And the global fallout was immediate. All of a sudden, the most populous country on Earth was communist. This completely upended the balance of power in the Cold War. The US threw its support behind the nationalists in Taiwan, while the Soviet Union suddenly had this massive new ally. And beyond that, the victory inspired all sorts of communist and anti-colonial movements all over Asia and Africa. Back in China, the changes were just as huge. The Communist Party moved fast to completely remake society from the ground up. They redistributed land, they set up a one-party state, they went after the old class system, and they put in place new policies that, at least on paper, expanded rights for women. When you boil it all down, the Communist Revolution did something no one else had been able to do. It finally ended decades of civil war and foreign interference. It created a powerful, unified country under the absolute control of one party. And in doing so, it changed the course of Chinese and world history forever. And the legacy of that revolution? It's still shaping China today in ways we see every single day. So it leaves us with one last big question to think about. If that violent, earth-shattering revolution of 1949 was what defined China's 20th century, what's going to be the thing that defines its 21st?